And welcome to another edition of Rosen Sports Monday. I am absolutely thrilled to have my good friend Chris Hawkey in as a guest. We got so much to talk about, but a reminder that I want to thank our sponsors, first of all. You'll hear from them a bit later. Lexus of Wayzata, Lexus of Maplewood, my good friend Charlie Swanson, the GM, and, of course, Broadway Dental, Dr. Ben Stein, who's in charge of that whole operation. And I've mentioned to you, again, I'm going to keep repeating because it bears repeating, beyond your normal taking care of your teeth. If you have sleep apnea, go see Dr. Stein. I mean, he can take care of you with a new device that I've been wearing, avoiding the CPAP machine, et cetera, but it is essential to good health. And so go see them as well. So thanks to those folks. Chris Hawkey, I refer to you as kind of a blue collar Renaissance man. You do everything. Radio personality, producer of Viking Game Days on the radio and KFan, musician, obviously. Lately, you've gotten a lot of notoriety, and rightfully so, for being a mental health advocate. I remember meeting you when you were doing race car driving.
Yeah.
I think that might have been the first time I met you.
I'm sure it is. Yeah.
Shakopee or somewhere, right?
Shakopee and Elko, that's right. Yeah.
Tooling around doing that stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Who'd have thunk it? And you're a voracious reader, both on regular books and iBooks, whatever you want to call them.
Audiobooks, yep.
Audiobooks.
Yep.
You got a good life right now.
I really do. I've been so lucky my whole life. One of the things I do when I do my mental health speeches is I start off by just saying, I'm the luckiest guy you're going to meet today. And I believe that I really am. You know, first of all, I do believe that the universe is listening. You know, you put positivity out there and positivity comes back to you. I've always felt that way. But also, if you had told me in 6th grade that I would have any one of these jobs, I would have been so pleased. And I have all of them, you know?
Well, and that's important to mention because you didn't exactly grow up in a utopia situation. I mean, a suburban, you think of all the suburbs we have here in the Twin Cities, sure, and all the good school systems and, just friendly atmosphere, friendly neighbor, everything. Just a much different world in Indiana, right?
Yeah, it really is. My hometown is called Union City. It's literally on the border of Indiana and Ohio. So the state line is the dividing line in my town. There's a street called State Line, and I had 69 kids in my graduating class, and it was the second largest ever at the time. They're even smaller now, but it was a factory town, and very small. It's one of those towns, like if you ever see a sign for it and you kind of driving by for some reason, you say, people live there. What do they do?
Yeah.
And that's where I grew up. There were a lot of great positives to growing up in a small town. There were a lot of great positives to growing up poor, to be honest with you. I learned that, with all these things that I have now, I can also live without them, So everything that I accumulate is just a real bonus. And it's been a heck of a fun journey, though. I can't even tell you, Mark, it's been, it feels like it started yesterday and I'm 54 years old. But when I left my house to go to college in Dayton, Ohio for the first time, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And even to this moment, I don't know how it all happened.
That's the best part of it.
It is. It really is.
Was it a happy childhood despite not having a lot of money?
Yeah, it was. That's the thing. I had some things happen, but overall, we did everything together. We raced things. We lived in a few different houses, but every house that we lived in had a football field in the backyard, whether there was one or not, and you could walk to anybody's house that you wanted to walk to. For the preponderance of my real youth, up till about I was 9 or 10 years old, we lived out in the country. And I mean, in the country. Brock Cosmos Road was the name of the road. And it was an old one-room schoolhouse that had been turned into a house, and it has since burned down. But if you wanted to go see a friend, you had to walk 2 miles, and that's not an exaggeration. You had to walk 2 miles, but you did it,
You didn't think about it either.
You didn't think about it. And again, I'm just on that verge. I was born in 1970, where we got video games, but not till I was a teenager. So we didn't have video games either,
I was going to say, growing up, I've mentioned a bunch of times about my upbringing, really modest. My dad had modest means and all that, but we had a great neighborhood. But I was outside all the time and I had to use my imagination.
Yeah.
And it served me so well, I think, in my work all these years because, I wasn't occupied by sitting in front of a screen for 12 hours a day. You had to go figure it out yourself.
Absolutely. I just finished a third book from this gentleman who wrote, his seminal work is called The Comfort Crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever get a chance, if you know what I'm talking about, it is a spectacular work. And he's followed it up twice with a couple of different books on the exact same topic, basically saying, we were born to be hunter-gatherers, and we don't have to hunt and we don't have to gather. And it's really broken us in a lot of ways. Even, back when we were growing up, like you're talking about, Rosie, I mean, you had to use your imagination. You were bored, and boredom is actually quite good for you, because that's when your brain fires up and finds something to do, and it lets you rest. And we don't rest, and we don't gather, and we don't hunt, and we don't gather. It's tough. But I count myself very lucky. I think I was probably the last generation, graduated in 1989, that had that kind of a youth
right
before it all kind of took off.
Yeah, I feel bad for kids in that way today, because no matter where you go, a restaurant, and you look over and they all have their little Game Boys and whatever it is, and that's okay. I mean, it's the way that parents keep their kids occupied. But I'm thinking to myself, man, we used to count Burma-shave signs on the side of a road, on a long road trip to California that my dad would take us on in a car without air conditioning. Yeah. Just counting, street signs and electrical posts or whatever it would be.
Yeah.
That was it.
That was it. And again, that's the way you fire up your imagination. That's the way you learn to talk to people. That's the way you learn to communicate with people,
So where did your travels take you after bursting out of that part of Indiana?
So I went through a broadcasting school, much like Brown here, only it was in Dayton, Ohio. And that was another just stroke of luck for me, because I was driving to college from my hometown, which was about 50 minutes away, and listening to my favorite radio station. And this was 1989. So it was, hair band music, the Big Wazoo, Dayton's dangerous rock and roll station. And I was driving to work listening to Luzak and Lindy in the morning, and they were yelling at their intern. And I had just learned what an intern was at that point, hadn't been in college for very long. And they were yelling at him. And I don't know why, I pulled over to a payphone way before cell phones, 1989.
Right.
Pulled over to a payphone. I dialed, 1-800-320-1029 or whatever the request line was. And Michael Luzak answered the phone, one of the two guys on Luzak and Lindy. And I said, I can remember what the phone looked like. And I said, if you need a new intern, I'll be your intern. And he says, do you know how to run a DAT machine? I had never heard of a DAT machine. I don't know what a DAT machine is. A DAT machine was digital audio technology.
Oh, okay.
It looked like a cassette. It was about 2 inches long. It was a technology that lasted maybe 16 months, but it was here and gone like that. I'd never heard of it. We didn't have them in my college, but of course I said, absolutely.
Yes, I
know what that is. He goes, all right, well, be here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.
Wow.
Awesome.
Just a random phone call.
Bam. That was it. So I went to school that day. The next morning at 8:00, I was standing outside their offices, and at 9:00, when the lady got there to open up the offices, she said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, Luzak said I should start being an intern today. So she went and got him. About 20 minutes later, he came out and he goes, who are you? And I said, you told me. And he goes, Missy, do you need an intern? She goes, sure. It was the news lady, Missy Kemper. And he said, okay, we'll be here at 3:20 tomorrow. You can be her intern. And that started my career in radio. Just a lucky stroke.
So you had the bug then once you got in there. It stuck with you.
I started, radio was always a huge thing for me. WLW and the Cincinnati Reds and Bob Trumpy and Bill Cunningham and everybody on that station. That was the home of the Bengals, and it was the home of the Reds. And even though I was in Indiana, that was the closest thing we had. We didn't have the Colts yet. And so I listened to WLW all the time. My dad loved talk radio. I loved talk radio. And I wanted to be a rock star. Started singing in bands when I was 15. And I just thought, well, radio is about as close as you can get, and I'll do that while I'm becoming a rock star.
Right.
And so I made that call, and I started interning at the Big Wazoo, and that kicked everything off.
Well, how did you, what was your road that you took to end up obviously here at KFAN and iHeartRadio before that? How the contacts were made, because that's a quantum leap, we all know. For
sure. I got, again, stroke of luck. I got that internship. I worked there on their morning show. I became their morning show producer after a while. Then I started doing on-air overnights on the weekends. And I got a call from a gentleman named Kevin Vargas on the radio. He's Kevin Cox, the Cox man. I know, right? He had been the afternoon guy at the Big Wazoo. He moved to Virginia Beach, and he was doing mornings there, just got the job, and he needed a producer. And so he called me, which is another story. I was living in my car at the time. So he called and left messages at the radio station because he didn't know how to get hold of me. And I called him back and he said, "Hey, do you want to be a morning show producer for me here in Virginia Beach, Virginia?" I heard the word beach.
I'm in.
I said, I'm there. So he said, "Well, my boss is going to call you. And I said, "Well, she'll have to call me at the radio station." So she did. The next day, she said, I only have is $4.75 an hour. If you want to come do that, you can have it if you want it.
Right.
I said, "I'll do it." I mean it, Rose. You know I'm not joking when I tell you this. I couldn't have found Virginia Beach on a map. I didn't know. I knew it was on the water. I didn't know where it was at. So a week after that, I drove my 86 Camaro.
Love it.
From Indiana all the way to Virginia, and waited for that office to open. When it did, I walked down the hallway, and sitting at the end of the hallway was my future wife, Kim.
Oh my God.
She was the program director of that radio station.
Wow.
I remember seeing her that day and starting the morning show that day. And from there, I worked there for a while. Then they changed the format of the radio station. I moved to Los Angeles for a year to try to be a rock star.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
LA. And what year was that now?
93. For almost exactly one calendar year, I lived in LA, and I was in a band that really did some great things. We got a record deal and went out on the road, and then the record company folded while we were on the road, and that's a different story, but had a great time. And then I had nothing. I called Kim, Lauren, and I was in Los Angeles, and she was still back in Virginia. And I said, "If you send me a Greyhound bus ticket, I'll come home." And she did. And I rode a Greyhound bus from Los Angeles to Virginia Beach, Virginia.
That's a long haul.
3.5 days. 3.5 days. And I got there.
Not a lap of luxury either.
Oh my gosh. Oh, let me tell you.
Painful.
I remember so much about that trip because I had gone from signing a record deal, 22 years old. This is my dream come true. I am now going to be a rock star. And the thing about it, Rosie, you know a little bit about this. If people think you're going to be a rock star, they treat you like you already are, right? Mm-hmm. I went from that to literally having nowhere to live and no money in my pocket. And I think about what that must have been like now. No cell phone, no money in my pocket. I got on that Greyhound bus. I didn't eat for 3 days.
Oh my God.
I went all the way across America.
You feel like a pioneer days almost. I mean, minus the covered wagon.
For sure. At one point in the middle of the night in, I think, New Mexico or something like that, there was a baby crying on the bus. Oh. The bus driver pulled over to the side of the road and stood up and said, "If you don't shut that baby up, you'll both be standing on the side of the road." I will never forget it as long as I live. But then I got to Virginia, and not long after that, we had a family, and Alex is 30 years old now, and
right,
and Abby's 23 almost, and I got back into radio when we came to Minneapolis because Kim's job, she got hired at Cities 97. We moved up here, and after 3 years, I was a stay-at-home dad, and then I got the job working for the Howard Stern Show.
Unreal,
locally. Yeah,
but it was always kind of behind the scenes where you
completely
chatting. You weren't chatting with the anchor or the disc jockey or whomever.
Nothing like that.
You just did that.
Yep. My skills were production skills. Mm-hmm. That was how I made my bones.
So how did that evolve at KFAN? I mean, I can't remember the particulars because I was on the morning show with Bob Yates and just the whole thing when I got hired way back when in 97 or not, whatever it was. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I was
Which is when I got hired
people.
To work at what was then Rock 100.3 when Howard Stern got hired.
Okay.
So what they did is they blew up that entire staff. It was Bob something or other. It was a country station. Mm-hmm. They blew up the entire station and they needed somebody to come in who could run the board and do the editing because the Howard Stern Show would come in from 4 to 5 locally. I would cut it up, cut out their commercials, put in our commercials, and run it at 5 o'clock to 6. So we were an hour behind. And they needed somebody who knew how to do that. I knew how to do it. That lasted a couple of years. They fired Howard Stern, and they brought in Lee Valsvik, your friend of mine.
Right.
And she needed a producer. And so they hired me to be her producer. And then Alan Cable came in. That lasted for a little bit. I started doing the NASCAR show on KFAN. Because Russ Bohatty had been doing it.
Oh, of course.
Right. And they needed a co-host for him. And that was my door into
right up your alley,
KFAN.
too.
Right, for sure. Yeah. So I did that for a while, and then I got really lucky because Superstar needed a producer in his midday show, and if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be sitting where I'm sitting.
Man, that's a hell of a ride. Everyone's got a story, that is for sure, about broadcasting, and it's a good lesson for folks young people who continue to ask all of us all the time, how do you get in this business? Yeah. Right? You get that a lot. And I'm going, well, here, listen to this story or listen to my story.
Right.
and figure it out yourself, because there's no one path that works.
When people ask me that, I tell them something that sounds horrible, but it's the truth. Do the thing nobody else wants to do.
It's great advice.
Always do the thing nobody wants to do. I crashed my Mustang. Okay. I fell asleep at the wheel driving to the Big Wazoo, and I crashed my Mustang. And mom and dad said, we're not going to let you do this anymore. You're an intern. Why are you, putting yourself in danger? Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, I'll get an apartment. So I told him I got an apartment.
But you didn't.
I slept in my car for 3 months. And that made me available, by the way, to do everything they needed me to do at the radio station. And I did.
That's persistence.
Do the thing nobody else wants to do.
Yeah. Well, right now you're doing something that you love to do. I want to talk about that a little bit more as well right now before we take our break. But, the Power Trip show has evolved. Obviously, I saw it all happen. I was a part of it for most of that time, and different personalities and management liking something, not liking something. But it seems like it's a process like anything else to find the right mix. And there's no way you can write it on a piece of paper. I mean, either you have the chemistry or you don't. And you guys had to figure out what worked when Corey Cove took over for Star and the rest of it. And, obviously Meat Sauce got his role, and, it just kind of evolved, did it not? I mean,
completely.
It wasn't like it was a ratings blockbuster at first.
Not at all. And to be honest with you, that's part of the reason we had success. Mm-hmm. So we were doing middays, and they got rid of Common and the Family Coal.
Right. Oh, I remember. I was working for them.
Yeah, right. That was a controversial thing. Right. And I said to Star, why don't we ask them if they'll let us do mornings? Because they were just going to throw in whatever, And he said, sure. So we walked down to Swedberg's office and asked, and he kind of laughed at us at first. And then they talked it over, and they're like, well, we're not going to give you any money.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to do it, that's fine. We'll give you a shot, because we were doing 1 hour during the middle of the day, and they knew I knew how to do mornings. So they had me write out this manifesto, what are you going to do? And I still have it. My overarching theme was, we're not going to beat Tom Bernard at what he does.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to make people feel good. When they tune on the Power Trip morning show in the morning, they're going to laugh, and they're going to for a moment forget about the job they might not like that they're going towards. And from that moment to now, that's always been the overarching theme of the Power Trip. But the ratings were so bad when we took over that they said, if you ever get a 3 share, we'll be pleased. And that's a really low bar.
Right.
And so we were allowed to fail. We were figuring out how to do it as we went.
Well, that says something about management too, because it doesn't matter what medium you're in, they could easily blow something up, because they're not the most patient people many times, right. Management, and they're just saying, look, we're not getting it's a domino theory. We're not getting the sponsors, we're not getting the ratings, we're not getting the sponsors. It comes back to, we got to change things up here
completely.
But they stuck with you.
They did, and Star had such a fantastic fan base, obviously playing for the Vikings for as long as he did, and he's just a funny guy.
Yeah.
And you gave us credibility from the very beginning. Both you and Barrero, who was a guest.
I forgot I did not know that.
First couple of years, he was a guest as well, once a week, but just by phone. But you gave us credibility. That helped. Star, a former Viking, that certainly helped. But the thing that helped a lot as well was Corey began as my intern 5 months into the morning show. Mm-hmm. We're going to be 25 years old this year. So he started as my intern, and he really had a gusto, and Star let he and I do what we wanted to do. And he'd already lived his dream. He'd been a Viking, right? So this was our thing. He was going to be the superstar, and we were going to build it around it. And that's what we did. And we learned after a while that we couldn't just talk sports. We had to be a full service morning show. And that realization really began to change things. And then Star was let go because of money, which is a very Clear Channel iHeart thing to do. And it was Corey and Sasa. They let him go on a Thursday, Mark.
I remember, I was there.
Yeah. And we had to do the show on Friday without him.
Yeah. It was tough.
It was tough.
It's it's tough being in that locker room situation where your best buddy is all of a sudden not there. His locker's cleaned out. I remember Star used to have at his desk, he would have like a pencil, something else. That would be it because he was ready to go at any time.
Crayons and a coloring book. And I owe him so much. And that was a very hurtful thing for him. I know it was, and it still is to this day. And to watch us go on and then have success without him must have been terrible for him. And I hate that for him. But we locked into a groove, and one of the other things that I'd always thought from the very beginning, Mark, was you don't lie to the listener and pretend you know what you don't know. So my goal was to put somebody in the room who was a football expert, somebody who was in the room who was a hockey expert, somebody who was a baseball expert, and yourself who was an expert on everything. That way we didn't have to lie and pretend we knew what we weren't, what we didn't know. And it's worked out.
But the thing that I've always admired about it, and granted, I've heard a lot like, oh my God, you guys feel like you're all in sixth grade. I went, where'd you get the extra 2 grades? But you're a chameleon. You change your personality, and you can be the mischievous guy, the prankster. You can be the authoritative voice. You kind of know what the gig is. You know what I mean? In reaching the audience and interacting with the other people on the show. That's not an easy thing to do, but you've managed to master it and, push the buttons. And as Paul says many times, your mic is on. Yeah. You're saying things that make people maybe cringe a little bit, but there's nothing wrong with making the audience feel a little uncomfortable too.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you for saying that. I really, really appreciate that. I loved that job and I loved that show. And I really, as silly as it sounds, I really do take it seriously. But, it is at its very basis, it's improv comedy. It just is. It's improv radio, period.
Yeah.
And so you have to be alert to what is happening at all times. You just do.
Well, no further evidence than what our entire community, and I'm almost going to get in tears here, our community, entire state experienced the trauma we all felt this weekend with the horrific shooting and killing and assassination of Melissa Hortman and her husband and what went on. And, I was listening this morning and Zach Halverson, who's a big part of the show, did a wonderful job this weekend of kind of keeping people up to speed of what was happening and also summarizing it this morning. But at some point, you guys turn the page. It's not like you're going to spend 3 hours discussing the ins and outs and what potentially is going to happen and the criminal case, et cetera, and taking phone calls from, which a lot of stations would be doing today, and rightfully so.
Oh, and doing it much better than we could.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a decision that's made, like when something that people do need a release too.
Yeah. I wrestled with it. I did not get much sleep last night. Wrestling with it because you have to walk that line. You know that you have to walk it because you don't want to ignore it. You don't want to pretend it happened. You don't want to say the wrong thing. Pretend it didn't happen. You don't want to say the wrong thing. You don't want to. There are times also when you don't want to be too jovial, especially in the wrong circumstance. But we addressed it and made sure that people knew that if something happened, we would tell them.
Right.
But I am also smart enough to know, and I have enough respect for my business, what we do for a living, that there are radio people out there who are going to do a better job covering it than I'm going to. And so if that's what you want to hear, and I don't blame you, you're not going to listen to me for that.
Yeah, but don't underestimate yourself. I'm just saying, if you had decided to go down that path, there's enough empathy. Certainly you have it, and the show knows how to make that turn.
Completely.
And you could have turned it over to say, look, if you guys want to heal today, we'll take some calls, whatever it may be. Don't underestimate yourself.
I appreciate that.
It does work. Speaking of sleep, when the hell do you sleep? I mean, I know you're on weekends and your schedule gets turned upside down because you're still performing and concerts and I see you with a big smile on your face and going, how are you not knocked out right now at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night? What time do you normally go to bed on a work night?
If I don't have a gig, I try to be in bed by 9:30, but if I have a gig, it's whenever I get into bed. I've conditioned myself to work on, Tom Bernard told Star and I at the very beginning of our run, your life is about to become a series of naps. And that's exactly what it is. And that's what it's been. I'm over caffeinated all the time.
So in what way? What do you take?
5-hour energy.
Okay. You're not a coffee.
I used to drink coffee, but it tore my belly up. It just made me sick all the time.
So you're 5 hour energy.
5 hour energy,
and it works.
Drinking, it's
You
done.
crash then afterwards?
I'm really good at sleeping. I might be asleep right now. I'm not sure.
You can sleep on this table.
I really could. It's maybe one of those things that I've developed out of necessity, but maybe it's something that I could always do. I'm not sure, but I can fall asleep like that.
Right.
And I can wake up like that and be ready to go.
And what time do you get to KFAN in the morning?
I've allowed myself, as I've gotten to be 54 now, and it's starting to get harder.
Yes.
I've allowed myself to sleep to 3:45. I used to get up at 3:15. Now I sleep till 3:45, and I get up and I do more prep at home now than I used to as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to be at the station between 4 and 4:30. If I'm there at 4:30, I'm running late and I'm kind of scrambling.
You ever overslept?
Oh yeah, a couple of times, but not very much. I have alarms in my bedroom and alarms in my bathroom. If the alarm in the bathroom goes off, everybody knows it.
Well, I think people have to understand this is not just a matter of a lot of people get up that early and they go to work.
Yeah.
You're going to work and you have to talk and make sense kind of on what's going on. It's not like you're sitting behind a desk in front of a computer. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from those jobs.
Sure.
It's a whole different element.
It is one of my other favorite sayings I say probably too often, but life is show prep. Right. So everything that you do, I'll talk about this tomorrow on the show. I'll talk about the storm I can hear outside right now tomorrow. I'll talk about everything. Life is show prep. So you just gotta get to the point where you're cognizant all day long of, I got to talk about that on the show tomorrow. So that you're prepared to have something in the morning. But you're right. You have to go from asleep to on the money in 45 minutes.
It reminds me of the Jerry Seinfeld book I read about. I think the title was, Is This Something?
Yeah.
It talks about the process that he goes through in putting together material and jokes, and he always writes things down. And it's kind of the same thing. Observing life, observing things, and that's kind of the basis of his comedy and why it works.
Completely. And it makes sense because you want to talk, again, when people tune into the Power Trip, they're hearing a bunch of buddies talk about things that are happening in their lives. And they feel like they're one of those people, and we're talking about things they experienced as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've done radio for a long time, going back to Tom Bernard.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how you connect with people. It's much more intimate, that's for sure. Let's take a break right now. I got lots more to talk about with you, especially about your mental health advocacy as well. You're listening to Rosen Sports Monday. Let's hear from our sponsors. Hey, Rosie here for Broadway Dental and my good friend, Dr. Ben Stein. I'm a patient of Dr. Stein's at both his sleep apnea clinic and dental clinic. He has a newly renovated and conveniently located dental office in Northeast Minneapolis next to Certix. I mean, it's the most modern facility you could possibly find. Dr. Stein has a great chairside manner. He's nice. He's understanding. He obviously knows his stuff, and he'll spend quality time with each patient. We'll make sure they are properly cared for. I want to talk about beyond the obvious dental care is sleep apnea. I was diagnosed with it years ago, and I was stuck with that silly, cumbersome CPAP machine, and I couldn't wait to get rid of it. And I mentioned it to Dr. Stein, and he set me up with his sleep appliance area. And it's the easiest thing in the world. You just pop an upper, lower appliance in each night. My snoring is gone. My wife says I don't snore at all, and I get a restful night's sleep. And if you have sleep apnea, Dr. Stein is the best to see as well to help you in that area. So if you want to contact them in Broadway Dental, give them a call at 612-379-2300. That's 612-379-2300. Hey, Rosie here for Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. If you're in the market for a new luxury vehicle, look no further than my good friend Charlie Swanson at Lexus. Whether you're on the west or the east side of the Twin Cities, they have got you covered with two great locations, Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. Check out the all-new Lexus TX, a spacious SUV with 3 rows of seating and plenty of room for all your gear. Head over to lexusofwayzata.com or lexusofmaplewood.com for details and to find your next ride today. Back with Chris Hawkey here on Rosen Sports Monday. Just a fun conversation with my dear friend. Every time I either hear you or you're referencing or you talk about a lot of people, you could get tired, you could be taking naps all the time, but you are a voracious reader, and whether it's audiobooks or you're always quoting something. Why isn't that important to you?
I want to understand, you know, I want to understand as much as I possibly can. And I'm fascinated by people. As you just said, my good friend, Chris Hawkey, I got a little tingle. I'm not going to lie. I'm that makes me happy to think that I'm your friend. I love knowing about successful people and what made them successful. I love understanding why things happen. I also try very hard to keep an open mind to ways of thought that I disagree with, and try to understand why somebody feels that way. You know, Rosie, when I first moved to Minnesota and I was a stay-at-home dad, I went back to college. I went to the University of Minnesota and I studied religious studies. Not because I wanted to do anything in that field, but just because I wanted to get a degree. But I also wanted to learn something that I was fascinated by. And I couldn't understand why people thought the way they thought. Right. So I that's sort of how I've always felt. And I listen to a lot of nonfiction. I listen to a lot of self-help. I listen to a lot of biographies and things to understand people's thought processes. I listen to a lot of things about music because it's such a passion of mine.
Well, speaking of the music, you've gone through a lot of different situations, but it's still a huge part of your life. And it brings you such joy. And I'm sure it brings standing on a stage when you look out in the audience and people are really enjoying themselves. You've evolved with a lot of different groups, Rocket Club, Chris Hawkey Band, whatever it might be. But you also like to write. I mean, it's not just a matter of doing cover songs. You've written a lot of songs, and that says something about your love and passion for this business.
I am so fortunate in that because of the radio show and what I do, people will come to see the band. Sometimes they'll come see the bands to say, "Can this guy really sing?" But so I'm given that opportunity.
When did you know you could sing? It sounds like, because you said something when you were like 15 or something.
15, yeah. I always was walking around. Nobody in my house played instruments, anything like that, but we loved music. And I would walk around all the time saying, I want to be in a band. I want to be in a band. And my mom saw an advertisement in the local paper looking for a singer. And she said, you got to call. And I said, I can't do that. So and I mean this, she picked up the phone and dialed the number and handed it to me. And I went and auditioned. I started singing that day. After I got the band, and I was 15 years old. I would go into the bars and they would make me sit beside the stage. We'd do 3 sets, and I would sit beside the stage during the breaks, and then go on stage and sing, and then and it took me forever to be any good at it. I wasn't a great singer. I'm a pretty good singer now. I think I can sing a lot of things, but I wasn't good. It was the 10,000 hours thing, but I was never afraid to stand on stage. I've never been afraid of that. I've always loved having that microphone and being in charge.
Do you still get that buzz? Because I was talking with Common Man last week about Ringo Starr and Mick Jagger and whomever. These guys are in their 80s and they're still performing, and they're all rich beyond. They don't need the money.
Right.
Why are they doing this? Right. I mean, it's like an athlete that's hanging on, except they're not hanging on. They're still performing at a really high level.
Right.
I mean, does that makes sense because of you just can't get that buzz?
My therapist told me that I found a job, a couple of them, where I could get the most amount of love from people without having to actually talk to them.
Interesting way of saying it.
Yeah, right. And it's the truth. I love being on stage and emoting and connecting. And that is really, even if I'm singing covers with my band, the Fabulous Armadillos, and it's a song I didn't write, you still are communicating to people. And I say this on stage all the time. Music is the great unifier. When I'm standing in a crowd with people, or I'm standing on stage communicating to people, I have no idea who you voted for. I have no idea what your political leanings are. You don't know what mine are. You don't know who the guy beside you voted for or the girl beside you voted for. It doesn't matter. We're all united by a love for this music. There's nothing else that does that. Maybe sports, I guess, but I love music for that. And also, though, Rosie, I can communicate thoughts and messages to people through writing songs and writing stories in ways that I never could before, and connect with people and feed the river. I love that. But more than anything, I get to go up and pretend I'm the person I wanted to be when I was 15 years old, and I'm 54 and I still get to do it.
Bravo. And that's, if you find your passion like that, there's nothing better. And at the same time, you've used your voice and your name, not just for commercials that I hear you on ad nauseum on television.
You want a roof? I got a roof.
Holy
You need a
crap,
roof guy? I got a roof guy.
Chris Hawkey's name one more time. Just kidding. But you've become a real strong advocate for mental health awareness. And I don't know how else to describe it, because I've been around a lot of athletes, and it used to be shunned, because if there was a situation, if you didn't have a cast on your arm or your leg, it can't be anything wrong with you. And a lot of people were suffering internally, fearing a failure, whatever it might be. And these are people who they look like they're on top of the world. Yeah. So it affects everybody in one way or another. But why is it so important for you to get your message out and to people to hear what you have to say about your story?
Yeah. I've fought the darkness for reasons I didn't understand my entire life. And it's the weirdest thing, because, I'll give you a little synopsis of what I say in my speech, because it's kind of, it works for this moment to kind of explain it all. I have fought depression. It runs in my family. I had OCD really, really bad until I was about 24 years old. I've gotten it sort of under control now, but it still rears its ugly head. All these different things going on in your brain. But I'm also the guy who, for some reason, I decided a long time ago that every room I walked into was my job to make sure everybody was happy, So you combine those two things. I spent a lot of my time taking care of people and not taking care of myself. Mm-hmm. I was walking through the business offices at work one day with somebody from a different show, doesn't matter who it was, and Chris Cornell had just died by suicide, the lead singer of Soundgarden, and a bunch of different bands, Audioslave. And this person I was walking with, he says, man, how could you be depressed? Mm-hmm. You're rich and you got all the money in the world, all the women in the world that you'd ever want. You're a rock star. How could you be depressed? And I can remember walking into the elevator with this person, and I wasn't mad at him at all. Mm-hmm. In fact, I felt really good for him, because they don't get it. And I'm glad, they don't understand that all the money in the world, all the fame in the world, everything, it's never going to fill that hole, that darkness, because you and I personally, and I would say most people who fight like I do, you don't understand why you are the way you are. You just are, And so I wrote the song called Happy. That was not why me? It was just kind of an explanation. Here's who I am. I don't know why I'm like this, but I am. And that song really changed everything for me. I saw the reaction for people. I play it at shows, or when it got released and the video came out. I did an interview with Janice Shortle, and I had people coming up to me, and Rosie, it was exactly like this. I saw this happen so many times. People would walk up and they would stand kind of in the back of the autograph line. And then they'd walk up and they'd look over their shoulders, make sure nobody was looking, and they'd go, "Me too."
Wow.
And I realized there's so many of us, and nobody knows how to talk about it. And nobody feels worthy of talking about it. So many of us don't even feel worthy of going to look for help. And then you do go look for help, and you find one therapist, and maybe they don't have an appointment for 6 months. And so you lose the idea that it's going to work for you, or you meet with a therapist and you don't click. So you give up, and then you just continue to spiral downward, and you spend so much of this one little life of yours feeling bad and depressed and down and alone. And so I just, for lack of a better way to say it, it became a mission of mine after seeing so many people and talking to so many people to just go out and say, I don't know how to help you, but I love you. And we're all in this together. And then you point them in the direction of people who can't help them.
Yeah, I don't know if the right word is it gotten better for you, or is it just a continuing, because it's a sad world we're living in.
Sure.
I mean, I've lived a lot longer, and honestly, I've never seen it like this. Yeah. People are just really on edge for any number of reasons, obviously. Wars, politics, whatever it might be, economics. It's just affecting a lot of people right now.
It is. It's hard. And for me personally, talking about it and helping people helps me a lot. So it's also a selfish thing for me to go out and do my talks and just talk to people via email or social media or on the side, after shows. It's helped me a lot to do that. I am in therapy twice a week. I have been for a long time. I do EMDR training for some stuff. And then I have a talk therapist. Dr. Nick has been great for me. So I'm still learning. I'm not only in therapy for myself, but what I'm learning is helping me communicate with people about what they're going through as well. And it really is a passion. I really feel like if we can continue to combat the negative connotations of asking for help, we can help a lot of people.
I think a lot of old school theories behind that is, men are afraid of expressing themselves
Sure.
a lot, and they're hiding so much stuff inside.
Yeah.
I've dealt with it, in terms of being caregiver and all that, and you just bury things, your feelings inside, you eat them, and it's unhealthy.
Yeah. And, I saw this movie last night based on a short story by Stephen King called The Life of Chuck. And I couldn't encourage you to watch it more, Rosie. I won't give away the plot of the film too much, but I'll tell you the overall idea behind the book and the film, which they did such a great job of communicating this. It's such a wonderful film. It's sort of like Forrest Gump, sort of like Walter Mitty, but and it's its own thing. But the overall arching theme, in my opinion, which I guess is the only one that matters to me, right? This is what I think they're saying. You're going to die. All of us, every one of us are going to die. Nothing you can do about that. So knowing that you're going to die and not knowing if it's going to be tomorrow or in 50 years, how do you choose to live your life? Do you choose to live your life in fear and waste this one little life? Or do you choose to live your life daringly and with gusto and as happy as you can possibly be and get to that finish line whenever you get there and say, well, I had a good time? You can choose one or the other. And I know depression is not a choice, but you know what I'm saying. You can go get help and you can talk to people and find a way to make your one little life better and scream into the finish line, have it as much fun as possible. I do believe there's an element of choice to it. And if we can find a way to convince people of that, it's going to be a better world.
What a great message to end this conversation with. That's it's brave, it's wonderful, it's meaningful. And I got goosebumps right now, sitting across from my good friend who I miss dearly, at least in the mornings, but I know I'm just a text away.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Christopher.
I love you, Rosie. Thank you,
love you too, man.
I appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to Rosen Sports Monday.